All right, it is time for a wrap up of the Manga Readathon. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm super excited to be here today and to share with you the books that I read, or the manga that I read during the Manga Readathon. This was a readathon hosted by Laura, the manga hoarder, and her sister Jen. I will leave links to their channel down below. And it happened in mid-June, and now we're at the end of June, and I thought it was about time to do my wrap up. And I had so much fun during this readathon. This is completely new to me. I had not read any manga before. I had already had one out from the library, but I hadn't started to read it yet. And so yeah, this was totally new. And the approach I decided to take was, because I couldn't do the challenges, like the challenges didn't quite suit because I didn't own any manga and stuff like that. So I just decided to go to the library, and I might have actually done some of the challenges without knowing. It's possible. But what I decided to do is I just went to the library and I looked at both the adult section and the teen section that has manga. They're sort of mixed in with graphic novels. And anything that was volume 1 that looked interesting, I picked. And I tried to get a variety of different sort of genres and styles and stuff. And then I just came home. I was just like, okay, this is what I'm gonna read. And I had no idea I had no idea how much time to give myself. I meant to ask that on Instagram or in a video at some point, and I would love to know. Like, most of the ones I picked were between 175 pages and 200 pages. And so I wasn't sure how much time to give myself in terms of how long it would take to read a volume. But I thought I'd try. I picked out 7. I thought I'd try one a day. And mostly I was able to do that. So that felt good. And let's just get to the titles. I figure I'll just talk about them in the order in which I read them, and then we'll see how this goes. The first one that I picked, I thought the art looked really interesting, but I wasn't sure that I would enjoy the story that much. It's kind of a weird way to start. And that is Golden, I don't know if it's Kamuy? And this has art and story by Satoru Noda. And it's the first. And it's explicit. Is it explicit? It is violent. I will say that. This was probably one of the most violent, if not the most violent, that I read. And I actually was really drawn to the back that had this awesome wolf. I thought maybe there would be like werewolves. So this is actually like a historical set manga during the Russo-Japanese War veteran. Oh, featuring a Russo-Japanese War veteran that isn't sort of known as this immortal. So he kind of, when he went into battle, he would just like rah and like rage on, and he would tend to survive. So it's after that, and then there's this story. He finds someone who talks about sort of like a kind of like an urban legend of like a whole bunch of money stashed away somewhere. And so it's about trying to find the money and information about the money and stuff like that. So that's just not like, I'm not into historical stuff. I'm not into war. I am definitely not into the things that people will do for money, like especially illegally or like extremely with the warning here. But I really did like the story, and I quite enjoyed the artwork. It's set mostly in a forest. See, like, there's a guy buried in snow. Like, it's not good. And they have these awesome sort of character cards to start off some of the chapters, and he befriends a girl who helps him. And this one? Yeah, that's a good shot of both of them. And I ended up quite enjoying it. I thought this, and I played Mango while I was doing this one, and I feel like I got 5, and then I said I'll stop, and I'll get more in the other ones. But I think I could have gotten a whole mango card with this one. But yeah, this one was actually really good. I did understand it, which I was happy about. I did have some challenge. I knew you read it from right to left, but I wasn't always sure if it was top to bottom, right to left on the page, if you go around. And of course, at the end, this one had a handy dandy, this is how you read it, with the number of both the panels as well as the bubbles. So this one I did sometimes read a little like everything at the same time, or like it would take a little while to establish the habit of right to left, but then on the page sometimes I was like, oh, especially if there was like a big sort of centerpiece, a central image or something like that, I was like, And now where do I go? So, but I think I did okay, and I actually understood this one pretty well, and it was quite enjoyable. And I am a little surprised to say, even though it was quite violent, I actually would keep reading the series. So it ended up being one of my favorites. Next up, we have, and I do not know how to pronounce this, Inuyashiki, I think. And this one is by Hiroya Oku. There we go. And this one, I picked it because it has an older protagonist, because I was noticing there was a lot of young characters and a lot of younger stories, although this guy is a war veteran, so he's not, but he looks pretty young still. So, but this one features a man who is a father. He is either older than he looks or older than people expect. His family is not really friendly with him, not really nice to him. It's contemporarily set in a city, and people really ignore him and are mean to him. And it was, I gotta say, this one was emotional. Like this one, I really felt for. I know he's smiling there, but I really felt for the guy, and he cries a lot. There's so much crying. There was a lot of crying. I was surprised to see that as one of the mangas. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of crying. And so it was challenging, but it's actually also science fiction. And so this one, I don't know whether I want to say what. Oh my god. Pet dog was awesome. I don't know if I want to say what the science fiction element is, because that might have spoiled it. I don't know what the etiquette is here with showing the images and for how long and what's spoilery, but there is a science fiction element that comes to play, specifically with his character, and it sort of changes things. And it was really interesting to see the direction that it went. This one I did find hard, though, because it was contemporarily set, and it takes on a lot of sort of harder topics. One, the fact that he feels very isolated and almost useless because his family is so mean to him, and I can't remember if he works or not. Don't remember him going to work. And then even just like he has kids and they go to school, and like I think some of the school kids are mean, and there's definitely mean kids and bullying in this one, big time. So for me, that made it harder to enjoy. With this one, it felt a little less realistic. With this one, it is very realistic. This is the most realistic of the ones that I read. So because of the harshness of the story, and I really felt for the characters, that I did find challenging. But I would continue it because I am curious to see where the series goes. But I don't know how much it sticks with this character, because they do sort of lay the groundwork for a number of characters, and I have a feeling that the second volume, or where it goes, might start to shift to some of the younger characters. And I thought it was really cool that it had an older protagonist and had a different kind of story. So I ended up really enjoying it, and I would also continue this one, even though, like, it was sad. It was sad. Then I had a completely different tonal change, and I never know how much of this is the title. So, Palula Magi, Madoka Magica, Homura's Revenge, and this is art by Masagitsune and Kawazuku. Not sure about the pronunciation there. And this one was just like, I had no idea what was going on. No clue. And it's volume 1, but like the Homura's Revenge, it was very quickly clear that was referring to another story, another volume, another sets of volumes. I don't know. Whatever it was, something like there was revenge going on, and it was about something else. And this one, like, the reason I picked it also, it's like so cute, and this little, I don't know if that's a cat or a bunny or what. It's cute. And I wanted to have something with a female protagonist. And so that's why I picked out this one. And this one was from the teen section. And there were some, I did like that it had girls in it. It was all girls, if I remember correctly. But it was all, like, it was just, like, I had no idea what was going on. There was all of this aggravation between the different girls, and there's all, like, this stuff about being a magic girl, which I think is one of, like, a subgenre thing. I don't know if subgenre is the right term for that. But, there was a girl who was a magic girl. There was a girl who, and I hope I'm not spoiling stuff when I talk about this. I'm not, as I mentioned, I'm not sure exactly, because it's unfamiliar to me. It's a little harder to be spoiler-free, so forgive me. I hope I don't spoil anything. But there was a magic girl, and she was friends with or reached out to another girl, but she didn't want the other girl, to be a magic girl, but the other girl really did want to be a magic girl. And then there was like the evil magic girl, which they call the witch. It's like, hey, what's up with that? So I don't like when that happens. But in any story, it's like, oh, she's magic and we don't like her, so she's a witch. Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. So, but this one, I don't know if it was because it was a teen one, because I read one other teen one and I noticed that this happened to both of them. There was a lot of repetition. Like, am I a magic girl? Can I be a magic girl? I want to be a magic girl. You can't be a magic girl. Like, all on the same page. Like, the same phrases all on the same page. So there was a lot of repetition. So it was actually kind of odd that it was confusing. And there was a lot of magic happening and a lot of magic battles. And I found the action type stuff a little hard to follow. I think it was sort of later. See if I can find some magic happening, a magic scene. Yeah, I feel like, so there's not many words, and I found it a little hard to follow. Like, I could figure out through the dialogue afterwards who was winning. But I couldn't necessarily always follow the scene. So that one, I was sad to say this one was a bit of a miss. I wouldn't continue it in particular because it obviously is referencing a different story. So that's the main part. But the repetition was a little much. And then was the one that, wow, this is the one that after I posted it on Instagram, I was a little embarrassed because, oh my goodness, I read the 7 Deadly Sins. And it says it's a Nakaba Suzuki presentation or presents. You don't see the author on the cover or on the spine. So this one I picked it out because it sounded fun. It was in the teen section and it sounded very adventurous and in the land of Britannia and the benevolent king lions. And I thought like Lionheart and stuff like that. So I thought this was sort of be like, that kind of era. And whoa, this was problematic at best. And I think very early on, I think probably the first flag is, no, not the second flag, but maybe it's the second flag. Yeah, so there's groping, a lot of groping. And then maybe I didn't even flag it, I was so annoyed. But I really knew something was going wrong when the protagonist sniffs her crotch while she's unconscious. Yeah, and she's a princess. I don't even remember. This one, I very soon in this one, I realized I wasn't going to like it, so I didn't really bother following the story that much. And so I don't know, he might have been Wrath. He didn't seem very wrathful, but he was a barkeep, and then she was a princess, that she was in a suit of armor, and then there was like smoke, and then she was unconscious, and then didn't remember who she was, and then she was a princess, but somehow she ends up being like a waitress at his tavern instead of like doing the thing that she wants to do. And all of the time he ends up carrying her over his shoulder and groping her, and then she apologizes for stuff. Like, it was just wrong. It was bad news. Like, the cute pig did not save the day. It was just really like, and it sucks because some of the artwork was really cool in terms of like the locations and stuff. But I was just like, no. And by the way, no. So that was a no. I will not be finishing that one. Can you tell? The last one I picked up from the teen section, thankfully, was one that I enjoyed a lot more. And that was Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, Volume 1. I don't know if there's another title here. Oh, wow, this has so many people involved. Okay, so original concept by Kazuki Takahashi, story by Shin Yoshida, and art by Naohito Miyoshi. There's the peoples. And this was so much fun. So this says right on the back that it's based on the hit TV show. I have never seen Yu-Gi-Oh! Other than on the TV listings. And it took me a while to figure out what the heck was going on in this one. But I finally figured out that it was and I loved this protagonist. He was one of my other favorite characters. He was so optimistic. And he had a very sort of traditional kid fantasy story, backstory that his parents went away on some adventure and he doesn't know where they are. And he's very optimistic and he wants to do the best that he can and, triumph on things in the world. So he's very optimistic and positive. And most of the action and stuff like this one goes around, it's about playing a game. that they use a deck of cards to do, I guess, like Magic the Gathering or like that kind of thing. And so, but like, and so he's kept on talking about building his deck, and I was like your porch? Like, what are you talking about? So no, his deck. And so I finally figured that out, and a lot of it was the battles. Now this one, I loved his optimism. I enjoyed the story, but because the like it felt like 70% of the story was told through battles, like, you know, armor factor this, and I call a Poseidon demon, and here comes the mouse bunny. Okay, there wasn't a mouse bunny, but like so much of it was focused on that. It means I probably won't continue the series because that part I didn't find that interesting. Like, I liked the creatures and stuff like that, but I wasn't following it and engaged with it in terms of that style of gaming. I do like gaming, I do game, but it wasn't holding it for me. But I loved his optimism, and I really enjoyed it from that perspective. And so this one was definitely a win, but I don't think I would continue the series. So that's a bit of a weird one. And then we followed the one that I actually had already picked out from the library, and that was Midnight Secretary, with art and story by Tomu Omi. And this one is a paranormal romance, I guess, office romance, and features a woman who is a secretary, and she comes to work for a new boss, and it turns out that he ends up being a vampire. So, of course, like, that's actually, you know, a story that, you know, I read a lot of paranormal romances, and I enjoy it. I loved how some of the subtleness of some of the artwork. So that's something that I tend to enjoy, but it definitely is problematic because he, like, straight out says, basically, you're not pretty enough to be my secretary. And that's just wrong. That's just wrong. So, but, like, if I think of it in terms of, like, Harlequins, and how many Harlequin presents are about, you know, dating the boss, marrying the boss, getting pregnant by the boss. Like, it's a huge theme in romance. But it was, so I had to come to it from, I ended up thinking about it a bit like that. But it's still like the outright saying you aren't pretty enough to work in this job is just wrong. It's just wrong. And all of the office workers, like all of the secretaries were women and all of the bosses were men. So that was a challenge. But generally, did I enjoy the story? Yeah. Other than that, yeah. And she's really committed to being a good work. Like, she is really committed to her job. But there is, again, it comes up, I felt a little problematic being like, you know, part of being a good secretary is doing anything, like knowing what your boss needs and making sure he gets what he needs. And I'm like, well, there is a line. There is a line. So, but it's, you know, anyway. So, but I will continue reading the series. I will be honest. I liked it enough. I liked the characters enough. And I thought it was a bit of an interesting, I don't know if it's a spoiler. It didn't go exactly the way I expected, and there were more characters involved than I expected. So it primarily does focus on the two of them, though. So, but I did enjoy it, so that's the truth. And last but not least, I read Batman, the Jiro Kawada Batmanga. And this was so much fun. This one I finished reading after the readathon because it's twice as long. This one was like 350 pages. And it was so much fun. Oh my gosh. So I didn't realize that this one was created, I think, in the 60s, like in companion or in response to the original Batman show. And then, but I think it's only been translated semi-recently, if I'm understanding correctly. And then they have these awesome shots of the like, to introduce the new comic or the new section. This one felt a little bit more like a comic. But it did have something, one thing that was interesting is often this one had numbers for you to follow, like the reading order. It's like, it says 1, 2, these little bubbles. And it also had sound effects described underneath for the symbols. The symbol and then the sound effect. So this one was a lot of fun, but it had 6 stories in it and they were all pretty similar. But Batman is like that. like old school Batman is quite like that. And I love the villains. Some of them were hilarious. What their powers were, what their abilities were, how they had to fight them. But it kind of felt like the same story 6 different ways. You know, there's not like character development between, like, you know, with Batman or Robin or something like that. And it actually isn't quite even though it's volume 1. it's not really an introduction. It starts right off with an adventure and a villain, and we have to go and so that was a little surprising too. But I did really enjoy it. I really enjoyed it, and it was just like oh, it was just really cool. So I'm really glad that I read that one too. But again, I probably wouldn't continue the series. So I'm very surprised actually that there's 3 series that I would continue are Golden Kamuy, Inuyashiki, and Midnight Secretary. Midnight Secretary, come on, like who are we kidding? And of course, that one's not a huge surprise that I would continue. But those 3 are. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Definitely enjoyed, but is not quite what like I feel like I got it on the first one, and same with Batman. I feel like I got it what they're doing, and then the other 2 ones were like there's just like no thanks and like stop. So anyway, it was so much fun to play along, and I want to say, of course, a big thank you and shout out to both Laura and Jen for creating and hosting the readathon. And it was also really fun to engage with some people and chat with some people that I already knew, like Dai was playing along and Jazz RJ was playing along. And then I was also be able to meet some new people, including Bizarre Individual, and like get to chat to like just everyone on Twitter and on Instagram. And I had so much fun, and this was a blast. Like it was so fun to dive into something new. And yeah, and I guess I had a lot to say. I did not expect this video to be that long, but so I hope if you stuck with it to the end, thank you very much. And yeah, this was so much fun. So these I forgot to do these are the ones that I read. It was a lot. So now I gotta go to the library, check out some more manga. So there you go. Let me know if you participated. Let me know if you've read any of these series that I said yes or no to, if you think it was a good decision, and or if you have any recommendations based on what I picked out, because a whole new world here and I'm just randomly choosing stuff. So it would be great to have a sense of what would be good. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.